Coming up next is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware. Patrick and I talk about silicon photonics, AMD finally leading in the graphics market, and why PCs are still better than consoles for gaming.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 80, recorded July 29th, 2010. Sand is cheap. This episode is brought to you by GoToAssist Express. If you're in tech support, save time and money by supporting your clients and colleagues remotely with GoToAssist Express. For a free 30-day trial, visit gotoassist.com/Twitch. It's time for Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware. I'm Ryan Shrout, joined by Patrick Norton on the other side of the country. How are you doing this fine Thursday afternoon?
Apparently, from early reports, doing better than you, which is unusual in the sense of I'm usually the one that's dropping and mangling hardware, but today you are on the end of the maimed hardware stick.
Yeah, it's been a rough day for electronics and computers and I. First things, I've been trying to set up a VPN connection between my house and my office. I've been fighting with that all day. As anybody who does any kind of work with VPNs will tell you, they're just never as easy as they're supposed to be. And then I had I had this really cool backpack I'm not sure I like anymore that has this side entrance pocket where you put your laptop in the side of it instead of into the top, and it kind of creates more room in the bag that way. Unfortunately, what happened was I left that zipper open and down all the way when I put it in my truck last night. So when I got home, I picked up the backpack and threw it over my shoulder, right? And then all of a sudden I hear clunk, slam, skid. And I go, oh, that's not good. And I turn around and I see my Lenovo X200 sitting on the concrete. And it has these are these magnesium bodies? They're pretty tough.
I believe so.
Pretty tough little machines.
Is the screen shattered?
No, the screen, I was still asleep when I went to go turn it back on. It was surprisingly functional, which is always good. Let me switch here.
It boots, it runs, the screen's still at 100%, you can type. So is it primarily a cosmetic drop, a non, was there any meaningful damage to the machine? Oh.
Well, the only thing that is meaningful
that thing crumpled like a MacBook Pro.
is you see that corner right there? That is missing a piece of metal, and also that button that's supposed to eject the PC card won't depress anymore. There's also some scuff marks all along the top, and then on the battery on the other side, there's kind of a big skid mark and stuff like that. But I was impressed that I looked at it and I stood there for a good 10 solid seconds staring at it before I went to go pick it up, debating which laptop I was going to get as a replacement. But it all just functioned fine. I was impressed. So at this point, it's all cosmetic. Another good thing of having an SSD in your laptop as well. So, and then I also dropped my nice shiny new HTC Evo directly on its corner. Patrick, I'm sure you can sympathize what it's like dropping a phone versus dropping a phone directly on a corner, where you can tell by the sound when it hit that's not going to be purely visual, purely aesthetic changes being made to the inside of your device.
Little glassy tinkly noise, or was it the sickening crunch noise?
It was more of the crunch noise. I won't try to show you this one on the video, but there are it was paved concrete, and it has definite dimples where you can see the texture of the concrete in it. And then I've had a couple of instances where the phone rebooted on me today, so I might be replacing that tomorrow. So that's been my day. Yours has been going more swimmingly, I take it?
I was finishing the last of the transfer of the lab of hope and coffee last night, which ended around 3 a.m. I did manage to. I gotta say, for as much as I'm finding the bumper to be incredibly overpriced, and it's also stretching, so it's getting looser and looser on the iPhone. So apparently, it's not made for use in pockets. Because you know it's kind of great, like because the soft rubber is horrible in your pocket, but it will sit on the dashboard during. Certainly not high-speed maneuvering, but I will call it, prudent and thoughtful maneuvering in heavy traffic environments.
Right.
But it also, I had, I basically have this giant, 18-foot box truck with a lift gate on the back because that's what they had, and it fell. I set it down on what I thought was the edge of the lift gate, and turned out to be to the right of the edge of the lift gate because it was that kind of night. And it bounced and then landed on the case because the case actually has a fairly, it wraps around the edge, which is really kind of critical for any case, for any phone, as far as I'm concerned. You want something that, you're not going to survive a direct hit to the middle of the screen, but you do want to protect the edges and the corner as much as possible. So I'm very happy I bought a case when I did. Plus, I never experienced the squeeze of doom and emotional suffering, I think is what they're listing on the class action lawsuits. But
right. So I guess the public service announcement of today, kids, is put a case on your phone and zip up your book bag.
And brush your teeth.
And brush your teeth. But yeah, hopefully your parents are teaching you that. We're going to teach you the stuff about technology. Your parents teach you about hygiene.
Well, in which case, back up. Have a proper backup system implemented.
Yes.
Sorry, I made a comment. Somebody was asking me about RAID 0 today and like RAID 5 and adding drives to RAID 5. And I made a comment about how RAID 5 is less about performance and more about, protecting your data, which because a bunch of people didn't see the tweet I was responding to, they were like, RAID 5 is not a proper backup system. And then mayhem ensued. Then the RAID 0 question up, and I'm like, I would, SSDs are cheap. Buy an SSD. Don't do RAID 0. And then this guy is like, RAID 0 drive or SSD drives. All of his clients, the SSD drive. He called me negligent for not doing apparently a client survey through Twitter. Because, there's kind of your audience. I know my audience. They're gamers, the enthusiasts. They do coding and stuff. And, they're not doing a lot of, say, implementing SSD drives into sophisticated RAID arrays for, like, large servers. Although I have a buddy that kind of does that for a living because he's a maniac and he works with data sets the size of frickin' Jupiter. But it became this funny discussion now. He keeps seeing, he basically says in his experience, all of his clients have SSDs or dying in their notebooks. And I'm like, are they using trim compatible operating systems and running the trim programs? He's like, I got to check. Which, it's one of those moments where you're like, your data subset, the people you're exposed to and how they treat their hardware, and software for that matter, can give you a vastly different experience. I mean, you pretty much you get 100 people in the room, a third of the room's going to hate like one to all of the cell phone carriers. Like that's universal. But anything other than that hardware, you always end up with a really interesting a response about quality and longevity based on who's sitting there. So
that's what makes it fun to do.
You had, where did it go? Sorry, I'm having one of those moments where the internet is disappearing on me because I can't touch tabs. Do you want to talk about silicon photonics?
Yes, I do. I want to talk about something new and interesting that will hopefully get a lot of people excited. This is Intel made an announcement earlier in the week about reaching a kind of a milestone or a breakthrough in silicon photonics, where basically the kind of quick synopsis is slowly over the years they have figured out how to produce lasers using silicon chips, and they have figured out ways to convert data in an electrical system of ones and zeros into photonics, light, basically data that's traveling through as light through a fiber optic cable. They've developed a way to build a silicon-based photoreceptor as well, so it can kind of read the light coming in a fast enough speed to decode this information and transmit it back into an electrical signal. And all of these types of things kind of are coming together finally, and they have announced, not really, it's more than a demonstration, it's more of like we're going to start manufacturing these now. We don't have specific customers or specific systems in mind, but they are building 50 gigabit per second silicon photonics systems that are going to be scaling as the years progress here into something, you know, up to a terabit a second based on the technologies they think they'll have and this kind of stuff. We've had some questions about what you would use this for, right?
Everything.
I mean, you think,
well, this is a long-running experiment, a long-running experiment that they've been working on inside of Intel for a long time, and I think part of this is laying the foundation. You get to the point where the tracers get so small on as process shrinks, tracers get so small, and you basically get to like individual atoms of copper for a trace or whatever metal they're using, right? And at that point, the heat from the electricity moving through the trace is going to melt the trace. So it's like, okay, we're going to move to light or other technologies, and that's like some of the stories. I think actually the PC Perspective story mentioned that, like, this is probably the foundation for, you know, chip processing technologies. It's also, if they scale it the way they think they can scale it, it becomes something you can use. I mean, USB 3.0 looks like a joke. Gigabit Ethernet looks like a joke. And if it's silicon and it scales the way silicon is supposed to, right? Because you grow silicon, it's fast. It's going to be a much, can I say that one more time and really annoy everybody? Affordable process than existing fiber-based technology, because fiber is expensive right now. Partially because it's expensive, and partially because nobody's really scaled it. And this is an attempt to basically take this and really scale it up in a big way.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about, when we talk about computers, the last, you know, we have these different scales or these different levels of focus here. And you look inside a computer today and like, what's the one device or one component that really stands out that maybe should be changed? And that would be like the hard drive, right? Because it's the last, we consider like the last mechanical device inside of the computer. Well, then you start looking at even deeper down and you look, well, what's holding back the chips and the communication between chips on a motherboard and this kind of stuff? And it's how much bandwidth can you get across electrical wires and what kind of speed and that kind of stuff, like you were talking about. And, you know, this iteration maybe isn't fast enough to be better than any of on PCB electrical systems, but I think we'll get, when you get to a terabit a second within, 5 years or something like that, that will be a dramatic improvement. But these today, they're talking about the benefits here is that it's low cost, it's easy for them to manufacture. It should be easy for them to manufacture on a large scale because obviously Intel has a lot of experience building silicon-based parts. They made it inexpensive as far as the connectors go. It's a really easy kind of slip-on, slip-off connector that you could use for just about anything. And so quick, easy solutions for this would be server-to-server communications or server-farm-to-server farm communications, external ones. And then, Intel has said that, we want to see this out in the residential world. We want to see this out in, not just business to business, but having, maybe Comcast or Insight or whatever ISP you have using this to go between their nodes to more easily
Anywhere
be
there
able
is
to
data. Anywhere bits yearn to move freely, Intel will sell you product.
Absolutely.
No, it's like you can assume it's probably going to be more efficient if it's. They're not really talking about what the cable is made out of, but if it's not copper, if it's glass, then it's going to be cheaper than copper. Which, if you start thinking about, people
it's a fiber optic cable.
Yeah. So basically, in my head, sand is cheaper than copper when you're looking at the base ingredients for a part. Right. So.
That's very true. That's a good point.
My gross oversimplification of the day.
It's a really interesting technology. I think there's a lot of areas where Intel can take this. People want to say that, what's this mean for LightPeak? LightPeak is really a technology that's going to be out at the end of this year, early next year. This is kind of 5 years away from any kind of mass adoption. LightPeak runs slower, 10 gigabits per second maximum speed there. And it's more expensive to build, kind of as if you were saying, because these aren't silicon lasers. These are, the more expensive standard optical-based data transmission solutions that we have today. So it's different types of things. You might call Silicon Photonics kind of the successor to that, to Lightpeak. Maybe not. You know, they're two different product lines, two different technology lines there. So another thing I wanted to talk about: Apple had new systems released, and they're not really super exciting kind of on their own. You know, upgrades to iMacs. I think they finally got rid of any Core 2 based iMac systems. They upgraded the Mac Pro for the first time in forever. You can now get a dual 6-core system, so dual processor, 6 cores each, 12 cores, 24 threads, starting at $5,000. Those types of things.
I think Apple's kind of trying to kill off the desktop corner of the business, because that machine is ridiculously expensive. And then I don't understand using server motherboards. I do not get that at all. But the really good thing about this is like 27-inch iMacs are selling for under $1,000 refurbished, as they clear everything out of the warehouses for the new models. I mean, that said, I'd much rather have a Core i7 iMac with a 27-inch monitor, but that's going to be a nice machine if you're into that sort of floating bezel of light and hope, to misquote Walt Mossberg.
But one of the things I found interesting about this kind of product release was the fact that they've basically now officially dropped Nvidia from all of their desktop lineup. They're using all ATI based discrete graphics solutions. Nvidia used to be, I think it was maybe as recently as 2 years ago, they were in everything. They were in the iMacs, they were in the Mac Pros, MacBook Pros, MacBooks, that kind of stuff. Now they're still in one MacBook at least. I think that they might still be in the MacBook Pros too. And then they just recently are in the new Mac Minis. But when you look at the desktop lineup now, Nvidia's out. And this seems to be, I would guess, kind of in a retaliation for, we've talked about on this show, the kind of the overheating problems that the previous generation of Nvidia parts had in notebooks. I'm sure you guys covered this on Techzilla and that kind of stuff, where Dells and Sonys and these other guys were doing recalls, or they're doing driver updates or BIOS updates because these chips were overheating and they were cracking on the substrates and this kind of stuff. And all of a sudden people would upgrade their BIOS and the fan was spinning full time on their laptop now and made it really loud and annoying and that kind of stuff. And Apple as a company doesn't
do aesthetically displeasing.
Right. And
constantly running fans, busted silicon, BIOS up. I mean, and basically they lost the contract, I think it's fair to say.
You piss off Apple and you're not really going to be allowed back in for a while, is what it kind of seems like.
You won't be allowed in until it's... Oh, sorry. I was going to say you won't be allowed back in until it's financially advantageous or perform. If Nvidia suddenly gets a clear performance advantage or a clear price advantage, all of a sudden the door will start edging open in their direction.
Right. And I mean, and Nvidia, I mean, they had to stick with Nvidia through this. My guess is that they wanted to drop Nvidia's mobility parts for a while. A couple of years ago, but the way design cycles work and the way that, that they had built the systems and the mobile systems and the iMacs and such in this way that you can't, I mean, it's not like a DIY system or a full desktop from Dell or HP where they can go, oh, okay, swap out the GPU, do a couple of weeks of Q&A and boom, you're done. These are very tightly integrated systems. All the, the whole driver infrastructure as well as the hardware infrastructure would have to change. And I'm sure they took their time doing that because they're Apple and that's what they do. But now we're seeing kind of, I think, the results of all of the problems NVIDIA was having a couple of years ago, which is kind of disappointing because now NVIDIA stuff is better. We haven't had those issues in a while, but make one months ago, a year ago, and the way mobility cycles work. And you really think about it, an iMac is really just a bigger laptop with a nice display on it. And that's what you're left with. So
what are you going to do, man?
What are you going to do? Well, I know what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break to thank today's podcast sponsor, Go to Assist Express. Now, Patrick, I know you're probably like me. You probably get a lot of phone calls from friends and from family that say, hey, such and such computer's broken. 25 Internet Explorer windows popped up all at once. Is there something wrong? I actually got that very question today. I was at home working on my laptop and like 25 Internet Explorer windows opened up. It's like, what were you doing? Nothing? I'm like, no, it's probably nothing type of answer. But Go to Assist Express can help you with this. If your job is in tech support, there's an easy way for you to save your time and money. And it can make you look like a hero to your clients and colleagues, which everybody wants. It's Go to Assist Express, brought to you by our friends at Citrix. It's an easy and secure way to support your clients and colleagues online. It enables you to see a problem on their machine without having to be there in person and then solve it, which is always one of the hassles, having to go out to your friend's house or go out to your worker's house, figure out a time, go meet up with them, or worse yet, they bring you their computer and say, here, please fix this. You don't have to do that anymore.
When they just show up at your house.
It's 11:30 at night. What are you doing? I really needed to get these files off my computer. Well, this is specifically designed for small businesses and professionals to support clients. The best part, you do not have to pre-install software on your customers' machines. That means you can start supporting them online instantly. It's a pretty cool service. All you have to do to try it out is you can actually get a free 30-day trial with this. So that's actually pretty cool. Let me rephrase this. You need to visit the URL, gotoassist.com/Twitch. TWICH, and you can go there, you get your free 30-day trial, see what you can do with it, log into some people's computers, that you get to see their machine, they can see your machine if you want to show them how to do something on your end. Maybe you're trying to teach them as well as just automatically fix something for them. There's a lot of functionality to this service, so give it a try. Go to assist.com/Twitch, and we thank them for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. Woo-hoo. Now, we finished off talking about graphics a little bit. Another news story. Good news for AMD. Besides being in the Mac machines now, they are topping Nvidia in graphics shipments in Q2 for the first time in quite a while. It says AMD ATI graphics took 51% of the discrete graphics chip market compared to Nvidia's just under 49%.
That's a much tighter race than I thought it was.
It is. I mean, you're 51 or 49. It's essentially a 50-50 split.
Right.
But if you look at the same period a year ago, Nvidia had about 59% of the market and AMD had 41. So ATI made a 10% jump quarter to quarter, I think, how that works. Yeah. So from Q2 2009 to Q2 2010, obviously this is because in September of 2009, they released the 5000 series of graphics card, got rave reviews. It was the first DX11 ready hardware. Had a huge lead on NVIDIA's parts in that way. They had all kinds of cool features like Infinity, they're power efficient, that kind of stuff. Now, that's just for that particular quarter. If you look at the total market figures, Intel still had a 54.3% share in the graphics world. AMD had 24.5% and Nvidia had 19.8%. So in the grand scheme of things, Intel is still dominating the graphics market because of their integrated solutions. But if we look at just that discrete option, AMD has a good sized lead there.
The graphics you actually want if you have a choice.
Yes,
I mean, because it's amazing. Like, most computers have an integrated graphics processor. Most of those come from Intel. Kind of end of story. Interesting. Wow. So do you think with, between the Nvidia losing Apple, do you think it's going to dramatically impact discrete chip sales? I mean, it seems like there would be such a small number of systems compared to the rest of what's out.
I don't really think, getting the Apple win is not necessarily going to boost your financials because of how many more chips you're selling necessarily. I mean, it's a big customer, especially in the mobile markets, but not as much in the desktop markets comparatively to the rest of the PC market as a whole. but it's a really big kind of marketing point and selling point, right? I mean, AMD is already kind of promoting, hey, look at all these Macs that come out with ATI hardware. They're using 5700 series, 5500 series parts. Basically, you kind of get that assumption of, hey, if it's good enough for Apple, maybe it's good enough for you, HP and Dell, and and all your other machines and that type of thing. So it's more of a feather in the cap type of thing necessarily than pure profit out of it. And my guess is Apple might be going to them saying, hey, you need to give us ATI, if you want us to drop Nvidia, I think you need to give us a pretty sweet deal on these chips. And because of the other kind of side benefits, they might have been willing to do that. So
right. Interesting. It's funny you mentioned iBuyPower in this episode. I had never seen any of their systems before until I got a question this week where it's like, what do you think of the Thermaltake Level 10 system from iBuyPower? And if you haven't seen it, open up a browser, type in Thermaltake Level 10. It's one where it says, I want to say monolith. It's this monolith, and your parts, basically they have 6 individual cases for your hard drive and a big box for your motherboard, and it's a polarizing system. People look at it and they either love it or they hate it, and then there's not much room in between. Weighs like 50 pounds. It's a big, heavy.
It's $800, Patrick.
Yes, I was getting to that. We were talking about it on Techzilla, and I was like, so you're looking at it. It's a $2,500 system. It's basically, the same as my home-built system, only with an $800 case instead of recycling an older case, right?
Yeah.
But I was funny. I had never seen iBuyPower, and
oh, okay.
I didn't actually make it to the set of systems where they're being sold by frame rates until I forced myself when you put the article on the list, because they have a Flash-based website and it's driving me completely insane. There's just a little too much music going on and a little too much Flash animation. It's like, I'm shopping here. I want to look at my specs. I want to click through things. If I wait for one more Flash, window to load, I'm going to leave your website, which is what I did until this is
good feedback to them.
Well, iBuyPower, please kill the Flash. It'll make everybody happier. But this is brilliant, though. This is brilliant marketing. They know who their market is. They're selling $2,500 systems. Okay, they have some considerably less expensive systems on there, but they know their market. They're enthusiasts. They have money. They want performance. They don't want to build it themselves. And for gamers, especially first-person shooters, they're looking for frame rates. So why not just, because there's this classic sign that's printed out and it's in speed shops all over the United States. It's like, how fast you run depends on, kind of like how fast you go depends on how much you spend. They're on the acceptance clip. And this is like, you want this frame rate? This is how much money you want to spend.
Yep. It's actually, when they sent me this press release, and I get a dozen press releases a day, if not more, and it's like HP is announcing a new business computer, and I think, okay, delete, and this one I was like, okay, for some reason I decided to go ahead and click through on it, and it's just interesting that nobody's ever thought to do this before. Maybe it's because they didn't want to admit what the price difference was, but essentially, iBuyPower, which is an interesting name for a company, iBuyPower.com, is selling systems, and you go to this webpage and you can select one of 3 games. It's a little limited right now. I think they're trying out StarCraft 2, Modern Warfare 2, or Battlefield Bad Company, and you can check if you want normal, high, or extra settings. And so just for an example, I chose Modern Warfare 2 at the top level settings. And what it does is it shows you an example system from that line. They have a Land Warrior 2, a Paladin, and a Gamer Fire 580 or whatever it is. And it gives you quick specs and the prices, but then it will tell you what your frame rate is with that system. So it's interesting because here we have the $799 system. It's a Phenom 2 part. It's using a Radeon 5670 graphics card, 4 gigs of memory, this kind of stuff. And it's saying you can get 44 frames per second. Now, I don't know how they're getting that number or what benchmark they're specifically using or that kind of stuff, but it's good to comparatively.
For the purpose of the story, we will assume that they are running benchmarks in the way that they were designed. Running benchmarks according to generally accepted industry practices.
Exactly.
Because they're not comparing their stuff to other people. They're comparing their stuff internally, although they may want to have a bias towards more expensive systems. I also noticed that the thing I did notice that I couldn't stop is you couldn't choose any other resolution. Everything's at 1920 by 1080.
Yes.
Which, of course... go ahead.
I mean, it's kind of, they're obviously trying to make this simple on their end. They want to maybe they want to expand this matrix out so they can test a bunch of different configurations. They say, well, if you upgrade to this graphics card, you'll get this frame rate. If you have this system and downgrade, you spend $200 less, you get this. I mean, it's kind of interesting to see. I picked StarCraft 2 at Ultra, and the system on the right, it's telling me we'll get 25 frames a second, the system in the middle 53, the system on the left 77, and I'm thinking, well, 22 is too low for me. 53 sounds pretty good. 77 better, but is it $1,000 or $2,000 better? No, I think I'll go with
is it 200% better, right? Because these three systems, it's $799, $999, and $2,000. Yep. I think it's interesting. There's this thing they do in the worst place they do it. I can never remember the term for it, but basically it's like the anchor number, right? You walk into a car dealership. The reason they put that ridiculous MSRP on the front of a car is because the farther you get to that's your anchor. So the farther you get away from that number, the more likely you are to think you are to get a deal, even if you're actually being ripped off completely by the dealership. So you look at this thing, right? If you're reading in English, you generally read from left to right and you scan from left to right, and you see $2,000, and then you see $999, and that's so reasonable by comparison. and then the cheap system, which is $700, because it's $19.99, $9.99, $7.99. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's not like it's a $500 system. It's not like it's a $300 system. I think they're just kind of funneling people right into the Gamer Paladin E740, which is I like the names, by the way. The Paladin to the Gamer Paladin.
You got to be creative with these things.
I love gaming system names because they always make me giggle. It's like the John Wayne Studley Alien Killer Special 47. You know what I mean? It's just just gaming names make me giggle.
So I just kind of thought it was an interesting way to sell a system. Like that's what you're used to seeing at review sites like I run and our stories you guys do on Techzilla. But it's interesting to see the hardware, the guy who's actually selling you the parts saying, okay, well, here's this, because it does kind of say, well, the $2,000 system's not that much better than what you get for this $1,000 system in this particular game. So are they cutting into their own profit margins there? Are they just trying to be honest with everybody? It's an interesting play, I guess. So
I mean, is this a guaranteed minimum performance for their hardware configuration?
No, I'm sure it's not. Sure, it's not. My guess is what we're looking at if you ask them is here is comparative performance between these three systems. They might say, they probably give you details on exactly what they did to get that number and how you can repeat it. But I mean, even I can't say when I do a graphics card review that this is your guaranteed minimum performance with this, because it just differs if you're installing a different game or some different scenario happens in that game that we hadn't seen previously and all that kind of stuff. But it's interesting data. And anytime you can get more information just by buying a computer, I think is better as opposed to just seeing a list of specs. Yeah. Most people are just kind of like, well, I don't know what any of this means. Why am I spending $200 on this graphics card upgrade exactly? I'm not sure. And this just kind of gives them heads up information there.
What exactly is a P55 chipset and why does it impact me?
Chances are it doesn't. We're kind of biased towards PC gaming here in general. It is a computer hardware show. Now, there was an interesting story last week that came out. It's on Engadget about HP's Raoul Sood, who used to run Voodoo PC, which was kind of one of those super high-end boutique system builders that got bought by HP. He's saying that Microsoft killed the Xbox versus PC online gaming due to keyboard and mouse superiority. And apparently... there was one game that came out, Shadowrun. I remember this. It was a really big deal when it came out, where you could buy the Xbox version and play against PC users, and if you bought the PC version, you could play against Xbox users, and it was this whole, kind of big experiment. But apparently Microsoft killed the project when they found that, quote, mediocre PC gamers could wipe the floors with the very best players on Xbox.
Dun, dun, dun.
And it's like, I think if they'd asked anybody who had played on both a console and a PC, that this would very obviously be the case. Now, you have some console experience, right? So, I mean, do you think this is really accurate?
Yeah, I don't know. It's. I mean, you know, I would. Oh boy, you know, I'll be honest with you. I suck with console controllers.
Right.
So if it was me against me, me on a PC would kick my ass on a console.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
That said, I know people who are ridiculous console gamers who don't play PC games, so they don't have a really good feel for the keyboard and the mouse.
Right.
Is it possible? Sure, absolutely. You know, how much money is Microsoft spending on games development? What percentage of overall game sales do they think they'll get from Windows? I mean, it's a nice, you know, it's a, you know, maybe it's a little far fetched, but yeah, you're Microsoft. You know, you spent the last 20 years fighting trusts, and you know. People have to have something to be upset with Microsoft about, so why not? They protected the Xbox 360 by refusing to acknowledge PC gaming superiority.
Right, this is true.
You know?
If you play a game like Modern Warfare 2 on both the console and the PC, the advantage you have of a mouse versus a joystick or versus a thumbstick on a controller is that you have a much quicker rotational speed that you can do with the mouse. Right. They kind of limit you on the console that you can only turn around at X speed, whatever that speed is. Or on the mouse, okay. you watch gamers like Fatality and these guys at the competitions and how quickly and precisely they're moving from point to point to point to point as they're looking, and that's where you get your advantage with a keyboard and a mouse, right? So, I definitely I play a lot. You know, like I played all of BioShock on the console. I played BioShock 2 on the PC, and it felt like a much easier game on the PC because of that kind of quick difference in, you know, being able to compare those back and forth. Now, it's not exact because they're not the exact same game, but I think there's some truth to this, and it's just interesting that it's something we kind of always assume, but to hear somebody that's at least known in the industry come out and say it and say, oh, yeah, they killed that because it wasn't working. It's kind of like, yeah, all right, that's kind of what we all thought, so...
No, they killed that because people had moved to the PC from the Xbox 360, and that they didn't. You know, it would be
as much money there.
Chase the money. I like the fact that at the end of that Engadget article, you know, they point out that we're running into the same kind of potential development issue with sort of Android versus iPhone.
Yeah,
I want to see some Android, iPhone cross-platform gaming action. Speaking of which, have you seen the Dell Slate?
No, I have not.
We had one in for a few hours on Monday. The 5, yeah, it's the 5-inch. We had one out. It's on the episode of Techzilla that's going up today. It is a big screen. It makes the Droid X seem not so big.
Okay, all right.
You don't realize how big a 5-inch screen until you're trying to fit it in your pocket.
Now, this has a slightly bigger bezel around it than the Droid X or the Evo, right?
A little bit.
Yeah.
I also tend to think of that as protection for the screen when I drop the phone. So,
yeah, I know all about that today.
Well, you know, you're feeling it. I know you're feeling it. What do we see? We got lots of Twitter questions to get to. We had an email he sent to me. First, I just wanted to kind of pimp an event that we are holding on August 14th. Patrick, have you ever gone to a Quakecon? No, I have not.
Well, then you are missing out, my friend. So Quakecon is still billed as the, I think it's the largest free BYOC in the country. So it's completely free. You bring your computer. It's a 4-day event, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's in Dallas, Texas. Quakecon.org is the address for it. Now, when it started, I think this is the 12th year for it, maybe 14th year. It's been going on for a long time. When it started, obviously, it was started around Quake, and it was started by id Software, or started by fans of id Software. id Software kind of adopted it. Now id Software is owned by ZeniMax, which owns Bethesda and some other things. So now it's kind of a much larger gaming convention. There's going to be exhibitors, but there's still a 3,000 spot BYOC. It's completely down in game. If you've never gone to something like this, it's truly kind of a not once in a lifetime, but if you've never seen one, you'll never seen anything like it before. When you see 3,000 PCs in one giant room, all booted up, all playing games, people screaming at each other, and the tournaments going on one side, and people throwing out T-shirts on the other side, and it's kind of it's a very fun event. On that Saturday during it, I'm going to be hosting the PC Perspective Hardware Workshop from 1 to 3 on Saturday. Basically, all that means is I get up on stage, yammer on for just a little bit. We give away a lot of cool hardware. I think we're giving away at least 1 or 2 full, complete gaming systems, like really, really nice gaming systems. We'll have SSDs and graphics cards and motherboards and memory and all kinds of stuff. And then we're going to have demonstrations from ASUS doing liquid nitrogen overclocking. Nvidia is going to be showing some stuff. AMD is going to be showing some stuff. It's basically kind of a big give back to the gamers and enthusiast party for a couple of hours during Quakecon, where we pass out as much stuff as we can beg from these hardware vendors to give you guys. And it's very fun. It's very fun. We're working on trying to stream it live. We might even be trying to get it streamed on the Twit network. It's the same time as the Tech Guy show, but we're going to try to work out an AB channel here. But go to quakecon.org and find out information about that. And then next week, we should have the PC Perspective kind of landing page up for it if you are interested. Back to some content. You sent me an email, Patrick, from a reader asking about laptop replacement. Do you have what's a summary of what they were looking for there?
They basically, oh boy, let me pull it up here under the sent mail.
They had a dead one, and they were like, it wasn't dead, but the battery was dead, and
wife's current laptop is 6 years old. The monitor's garbage, quote, double rainbow garbage to get your internet meme on. The battery holds a charge for no time. New battery's $110. He figures he can throw another $100 at it and get a netbook instead. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Quote, can you recommend a decent one that can handle crisis? Oh, wait, no, this laptop is for the wife, not me. Right, so just email Hulu, all things Flash and web browsing that costs as close as possible, if not under $200. Might be able to swing a laptop as well, because I think she might want a larger screen, but I want cheap. Ryan in New Jersey. Hulu and Atom-based processors, which is what's in most netbooks, don't necessarily play well together. Even on the wee little 10-inch screens on those. Other than that, I mean, for email, for web browsing, for basic day-to-day use, netbooks are great. For full-screen flash video, they're not so hot unless you find one that is the Atom with the Nvidia Ion graphics, in which case you do get decent acceleration, although the flash stuff is still being worked out a little bit. It's going to be like I think you might want to get your wife, and I have a wife, so I'm definitely going to keep the wife happy. I think you probably want to spend at least $350 to $400 for a notebook, because if she got 6+ years out of the last one, that's a phenomenal life for a notebook for most people. Most people are lucky to get years out of a notebook. So I'm going to go to basically where I run to immediately, which is the Dell deals. I mean, what would you want to see for a $200 notebook? You could get a netbook, but it's not going to do the
really
video.
Tough. I went to Newegg and I searched under netbooks and Ion, and the lowest cost Ion based netbook I found was $479. Which was most surprising to me. Maybe I'm missing one of these models, but I mean, that's an Intel Atom processor, 1366 by 768 screen, 2 gigs of memory, Windows 7, and then the Atom processor. That is kind of a lot. It's kind of a tough pill to swallow for $479. Let me look here. There was another one. Yeah, it looks like They're all about $479 for that. But what I did find something else is I just went to notebooks, went out of the netbook category, went to notebooks and said, give me the cheapest notebooks you got. And after I skipped through a couple of really crappy ones, I found a Toshiba Satellite notebook with a dual-core Athlon 2 processor, 2.1 gigahertz, 15.6-inch screen, 4 gigs of memory. It has ATI integrated 4250 graphics. You know, it's almost 6 pounds. And this is $399 for this system. And it's going to be a better overall system. You get the bigger screen, you get a bigger keyboard. The battery life is going to be lower, if that's a concern. Right. But I think this processor, well, I know this processor is going to be better performing. And I think overall as a system, it will be a much better solution than a netbook. I think what we're seeing is netbooks have this cachet about them where they're kind of sexy now, and the Ion chipset comes with a little bit of premium. And, you know, $479 is not a really cheap machine anymore when you consider a lot of things, especially if you're looking at like the Dell Outlet Store or, you know, your Best Buy circulars on Sunday.
Yeah, even a full price Inspiron 15 with a Core 2 Duo is like $500. I'd probably skip the Celeron 900 base system, although you can, which is actually, you know. And the funny thing is given that his wife's running on a machine that's 6 years old, a Celeron 900 with a couple gigabytes of RAM is going to seem ridiculously fast compared to the system she has. The best thing about waiting as long as possible to upgrade your system is when you finally buy a new system, even if it's kind of at the low end, it's still going to seem so much faster. So yeah, maybe a $400 Inspiron 15 with a 900, you know, $500 gets you a Core 2 Duo and a pretty large hard drive. And that's not even from the Dell Outlet, which is where I bought like the last 3 notebooks I've bought. So I'm with you, man, Ryan. I think you're gonna need to spend a little bit more money on that notebook, or accept the fact that your wife may not be able to watch Hulu.
It's tougher than it should be. You know, I mean, as far as, you know, applications go, people complain about, we got too much computer than we need. And here's one of those cases where that's not necessarily the truth. So,
well, when you think about how complicated a notebook is and the amount of hardware that goes into it and the screen that goes into it, it's amazing that you get the quality you do for like $400. Yeah. Did you want to do the Phenom Athlon question, or did you want to talk about RAID 5 array and adding additional drives?
Was this one of our Twitter questions here?
Yes. You mentioned skipping this. Is there any advantage to getting a Phenom over an Athlon for regular computing and basic gaming, Portal, World of Warcraft, stuff like that? Asks at Frozen Summers.
It's not, you know, basic computing, you're probably not going to tell a big difference if you're talking about like a modern 2.5 or higher, 2.8 or higher Athlon or Phenom processor. You know, the Phenom's going to be a little bit better. You get higher cache levels, is a little bit newer architecture and that type of thing. Depending on what the price difference is, I want to say you can get similarly clocked Athlons and Phenoms for me, $20-30 difference. You know, I would probably throw the Phenom in there just because. Is it going to make a huge difference in your Portal and World of Warcraft gaming? Probably not as much as, say, the graphics that you decide to use. But I would say if you've already got an Athlon, don't bother upgrading to the Phenom. If you're picking between one of the two for a new system or an upgrade, I might swing for the Phenom at this point.
I think it would be fun, especially for video editing. I got one for you. Jack Truong asks, what's the best passive video card in the market right now? So I assume when he says passive, he means doesn't have a fan attached to the card. Okay.
I assume so too. If you look at, what is it? I saw a Radeon 5750, I believe, from HIS. Also, I'm guessing there on that. It's a 5750 for sure. It came, I know this because when we got our silent system from Puget Systems, it had 2 of these graphics cards in it. And they're completely passively cooled, 2-slot cards. 5750 is going to be a pretty high-performing card for what you get with a passive cooler. And I'm trying to think. It's been a while since, passives are pretty niche items as well. Not a whole lot of people are asking for them. but they're good for home theater PCs. They're good if you just have an annoyance for noise and that kind of stuff. So look for, I want to say is HIS 5750. There's a passive version of that. You just Google around for passive 5750 and you should come up with at least a couple of options there. So let's see. Pile of mush. I knew we were going to get to this. Is there any real performance gain by creating a RAID 5 array with more drives, or does it just add capacity?
It was funny, based on some later tweets that came around from Pile of Mush. I'm pretty sure he has a lot more experience with RAID 5s than I do. From what I've been told, yes, you basically adding additional drives, you trade off, and the big chunk of my afternoon was bouncing around talking with people about RAID and SSDs and the difference between doing stuff for servers and doing stuff for home use on systems. But as you add additional hard drives, you gain additional performance, but you end up makes it more basically you end up losing data parity or makes it more complicated to protect the data. Short answer is somebody was telling me like RAID 5 is great up to about 8 drives, and then you should be moving on to RAID level 6. So in terms of real performance gain, I think a lot of that depends on how the disks are being hit, how it's being used. Is it long-term storage? Is it storage being used in day-to-day? And he actually, I wish I could find the tweet that he sent out later, because he had a pretty interesting server that this was attached to. The secondary question, which you and I were talking about before, was people were talking on Twitter about a guy asked me about he wanted to build a RAID 0, right, to build striping for performance, and I told him he should just get an SSD drive rather than deal with the pain and the frustration of waiting for his RAID 0 to fail. And it was funny that some people reacted very strongly to that, and then a lot of people started tweeting about these insane SSD RAID concoctions that people have been coming up with. Yeah. It turns out a friend of mine recently built 25 X25M drives into a ridiculously fast RAID system. So I'm going to try to see if I can get some more details out of John on that one, because that sounds John deals with literally like just the most ridiculous giant sets of data. I want to say for physics labs or astronomy or something like that. And he deals with data storage problems. Yeah, I mean, I think he starts at petabytes and then starts to think about it seriously.
Let's see. We got another one here from Super Patty, who asks, I DVD rip PHP code gaming sum on a Core i7 820, 2 gigs RAM, 1 gig Radeon HD 4650, 500 gig SATA 3 hard drive. What is his best upgrade for under $100? SSD, vid card, or RAM?
I got to go with RAM.
Yeah, as soon as I saw the 2 gig memory on there, that was my first thought. It was like, I'd up that to 4 at the very least, and I think you can do that for well under $100 today.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, especially if Newegg or Tiger, Tiger Direct, or even Amazon. Mm-hmm. Someone said I picked up like 8 gigabytes a year ago, or no, 12 gigabytes a year ago for like $300. So I imagine 4 gigabytes today should be like, $25, $30,
$60 at the most. Yeah. What else we got on our list down here?
I have an Asus P5KE P35 chipset motherboard with a Q6600 with the Nvidia 460B overkill. The classic, we don't know what your processor is.
Yeah, he said Q6600.
Oh, sorry, I missed that part. Even though I said it.
Core 2 Quad 6600 with a 460B overkill. I don't think so. You still got to remember the gaming is still mostly GPU bound, with a few exceptions. And the GTX 460 is a great card, but it's not a 480 or 5970 or something like that. So it's not going to completely skew your system. The Q6600 is still a great processor, overclocked or stock, anything like that. I mean, it's good all the way around. Let's see. Let's maybe do one more question here. Maybe make it a quicker one. Devin Baines asks, I have an OC Genie motherboard from MSI with a Core i7 860 and a stock fan. Do I upgrade the stock fan? Not had a chance to actually use the OC Genie yet.
Always.
Always, yes. The stock cooler that comes with Intel processors is okay. Like, it gets the job done. I use one on our graphics test bed because it is a non-overclock processor. It just sits there and it's doing its own thing. If you're going to do any kind of overclocking, and in reality, even if you are not, I would almost always recommend upgrading from the stock heatsink that Intel provides. Look at some of the reviews. I know Hard OCP, Kyle over there, recently did a big, or at least a quarter. He does like a quarterly heatsink roundup, and the difference at idle is not that dramatic. The temperature difference on the processor at idle is not that big between nice heat sinks and the not so nice stock heat sink. But when you get into load temperatures where you're 100% load for an hour on the system, and then you're starting seeing differences of like 70 Celsius versus 50 Celsius, and that's huge. That's really dramatic, of a difference there. So
it's also interesting because the way the i7 works is once it gets up to around 100 degrees Celsius, it automatically basically you overclock, you generate more heat. As the chip approaches 100 degrees Celsius, it throttles back on performance until it cools off to what it considers an appropriate point, which you hit that 100 degrees Celsius with a stock cooler really fast if you have, if you're kind of any kind of aggression with your overclocking. So basically you can overclock, then the thermal protection kicks in, and you can end up with a lower performing processor as a result than you would if you just let everything stock. So yes, and it's amazing because the air coolers these days are phenomenal for almost no money. It's like a Thermaltake, the one actually you were mentioning, Kyle, from Hard OCP before, the Thermaltake Co-Gauge True Spirit. I just bought one of these. I didn't realize it was going to be about 2 feet high, but for $40 it is obscenely quiet. And, as we were talking about the water cooling thing, I'm sort of pulling together numbers and doing some rapid heat benchmarking so I can do some comparisons off this. But yeah, it's like the build on it is really solid. It's a good looking piece of hardware. And for $40, man, it will make a huge difference if you're in your overclocking, if you really want to try to get performance out of that CPU.
Definitely. All right, before I wrap up the show, last week I promised some people the chance to win one of 5 copies. They wouldn't each win 5 copies of Just Cause 2, which is a relatively new PC game donated to us. Nvidia gave us a whole bunch of copies with the GTX 460 release, and I saved a handful for Twitch viewers and listeners. It was a modest number. I expected more people to just send an email for the chance at a free game. We had about 180 to maybe 200 entries for that. And we have picked our 5 winners in no particular order. Each of these people will be getting an email from me asking for they'll just be getting an email with the Steam key in it, I guess.
The miracle of Steam.
Sean with no last name, Andrew Delaney, Bob Burgess, Todd Hansen, and Peter Wall. All of those people will be getting an email from me with the key in there. So congratulations to those guys. And maybe after Quakecon we'll have some extra T-shirts to give out or some extra goodies that we can pass out as well in a future episode. Now, Patrick, where can we find you other than this wonderful show, which is recorded every Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern at live.twit.tv?
Oddly enough, the primary show I work on, Tekzilla, TEKZILLA.com, comes out on Thursday afternoons. So you can watch your Tekzilla. You can get your live interaction on right after that, and do that every week with Veronica Belmont. So, and like I mentioned before, we have the Dell Streak and some other shiny happy toys. Including the report from Comic-Con, should you be into the whole Comic-Con science fiction, fantasy, pop entertainment thing. So. I
really tried to go to that this year. I really did. But by the time I decided to go, tickets had been sold out for months and months and months. And then my press inquiries were met with an email back to me saying, we are not accepting any more press applications this year. I think they had said they had 3 times as many as they did last year for
Comic-Con's 160,000 people this year, which means it is almost as large as CES. CES being one of the largest trade shows in the world, the Consumer Electronics Show. I can't believe they can still fit that many people in San Diego.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, that's a significant percentage of the local population, and the tickets sell out in days. The crew that goes from here, Roger Chang, Eileen Merritt, and some of the rest of the people, the tickets go on sale, and Roger, who I work with on TechZone and HG Nation, is literally like at his system an hour before, like making sure all of his cables are plugged in, and he's got a single browser window open and nothing going, and the phone is like ripped out of the wall. And you know, he just works at it until he gets his tickets, because they get absolutely hammered. It is amazing how fast that show fills out. So if you couldn't go, feel free to watch Texzilla. Or go to Flickr or any
I will be doing that. You can find me at PC Perspective, PCPer.com. We do reviews of PC gaming hardware, mobility stuff, laptops. We did some StarCraft 2 testing. Maybe next week, after I've had a little bit more practice, I've only played it for maybe like an hour so far, I'll give out my Battle.net name here. Everybody can add me and whoop up on me on some multiplayer matches and embarrass me, record those replays and share them with their friends or something like that. So we'll have that to look forward to. It's been a good episode. Good talking to you, Patrick. Everybody else, we will see you next week on Twitch.